Good evening, everybody.
Kavod Harav, how are you? Kodesh
Baruch
Tov.
Hashem, thank you. Kadosh Tov, thank you. Okay. So we said in the tour yesterday that even ספק צידה, אפילו ספק צידה, אסור כגון מצדות חיות דגים ועופות, שהיו פרוסות מערב יום טוב. So even if it was a doubt whether it was caught on Yom Tov or the day before, it's still forbidden. So where's the source for that? It says Bet Yosef, Mishnah Sham, it's a Mishnah over there, Chaf Da'ad Amud Aleph, מצודת חיה בעופות בדגים שעשן מערב יום טוב לא ייטול מהם ביום טוב אלא אם כן ידוע שנצודו מערב יום טוב. So says the Mishnah there that if something was trapped inside that trap on Yom Tov, you shouldn't take it unless you know for sure that it was caught before Yom Tov. Then it's okay. Ran explains, so Ran says, right, the reason why you're not allowed to do this is because it's a doubtfully something which was prepared. I'm sorry, not prepared, but something which is designated or not designated. With the Gemara, it says there, Ifligu Tanaya, right? There's a machloket between the Tanaim. Besafek Mukhan regarding this issue of a doubtful issue like this. And they pass in halacha like the one that forbids doubts. Katav Rav Magid, Pek Bet. So it says Rav Magid, Da shekol din muksiv nolad vichlal zeh v'atam mipnei shehu davar sheyesh bo matirin. Oh. So he says, right, why is it forbidden? This case, I mean, you would think, right, it should be permitted. Why? Because it's something which is doubtful regarding a rabbinic prohibition. So you would think it should be allowed. So comes and tells you the reason why it's not allowed, even though it's only rabbinic and it's doubtful, is because davar sheyesh lo matirin. What does that mean? It's something which has a permission. In other words, eventually it will become permitted with the passage of time. So something which becomes permitted with the passage of time is not permitted because of a doubt. This is the rule, the general rule like this in halakha. So that's the reason why. Okay, very good. So let's go on.
Kavod Harav, can you repeat that one more time? What does it mean eventually? How far
In
does
other
it
words, with the passage of time, it'll become permitted. Let's say, tomorrow, right? Whatever, just for example, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Oh,
It'll
tomorrow.
be permitted tomorrow. Yeah. So wait, you should wait.
Until it becomes permissible.
Right. Don't say it's a doubt. Since it'll be permitted anyway, so wait till the time that it's permitted.
Okay. Thank
That's
you.
what it means. God bless. Okay, so That's what it says. Okay, good. So another reason he gives is that another alternatively reason is that the rabbis wanted to be stringent, right? In this case. So the question is why? Right? So what's the answer? The answer is that because, as we said, right, people tend to treat Yom Tov, lightly. They don't take it seriously. So therefore, the rabbis wanted to stress the severity of it by forbidding it, even though in general it should be allowed such a thing like that. Okay, whatever. Two different reasons. והרשב"א חילק ואמר שכיוון שהמוקצה ונהוג מדבריהם הולכים בספקן, so it says Rashba, right, in general, right, muktzeh and nolad, right, which are only forbidden from the rabbis, we usually go when it comes to a doubt, להקל, to lenient. ולא אמרו אסור אלא בדבר שקרוב ליגע בשל תורה. So he says the reason why they forbade this right then, right? What's the reason why? According to him, right? We already gave two other reasons, but this is the third reason that is brought by the Rashba. So the Rashba says the reason is because it's close to being something which is from the Torah. Right? כגון ספק ניצוד ביום טוב, ספק ניצוד בערב יום טוב. So what does that mean? If it was aval so something like, let's say, which is doubtfully caught on Yom Tov or before Yom Tov, it's close to being something from the Torah. Aval shar spekot mutarin, right? But he says when it comes to other doubts, though, in general, right? He says they're allowed. Zui svarato besifro, v'ani tama mizeh. Interesting, right? So he says, right, that this is what he says, but he says I'm not very comfortable with this reasoning. Why is that? שאם כן ספק ביצה אם נולדה ביום טוב, so he says if that's the case, then when you have a doubt regarding an egg, right, which was laid on Yom Tov or Erev Yom Tov or before Yom Tov, למה היא אסורה? Why right why is it forbidden? It should be allowed according to this reasoning, right, of the Rashba. It says also the Braita of the doubt here, right, was written stam. Right, what does that mean? Without any attribution. Kuram sugyat the perek kama. So he says they're all coming from the first perek, Dar Amud Aleph in Betza. Muchat sapek nurad le'achamir udvarav tzarich iyun. So he says, right, comes out that usually, right, something which is doubtfully created right on Yom Tov is going to be stringent. We're going to be stringent. So therefore, he says, right, the words of the Rashba are a little bit, right, doubtful, whatever. In other words, they're not so clear, right, why he says what he says. So he says, therefore, Rabbeinu, he says, who didn't differentiate, seems more correct. So who was the one who argued here with the Rashba? Let's see. The Rabbi Magid, right? It was Rabbi Magid. So Rabbi Magid likes the Rambam more than he likes the Rashba, right? In this particular halacha, and therefore, right, he has questions on the Rashba here. Okay, interesting. That's the story there. So the Bet Yosef seems to agree with that. That the Rambam is better. So right, that would probably mean that we go like the Rambam. Okay, let's see the Shulchan Aruch here. Right. So says Shulchan Aruch, afilu safek tzeda asur. Right. As we said, even something which is doubtfully, right, trapped on Yom Tov is forbidden. Kegon metzudot chayav dagim ve'ofot. Uh, so, for instance, right, what's the example? That you have a trap, right, for animals or fish or birds, right? Shayu prusot merav Yom Tov, and it was laid out before Yom Tov. Ulmachar motzi behen, right? And tomorrow on Yom Tov, he finds there that something was trapped there. Asurim, it's forbidden. Ela im ken yadua shenitzad b'yom, unless you know for sure, right, that it was caught before Yom Tov. ואם מצא המצודות מקולקלות מבערב יום טוב, so he says, right, if he found that the trap was ruined, right, whatever, damaged before Yom Tov, בידוע שמערב יום טוב ניצוד, then you know for sure, right, that it was trapped before Yom Tov, obviously. So that's the story, right? So again, right, to reiterate, what's the reason why the doubt here is not allowed, right? It should be allowed according to, right, the rules of halacha. It's a doubt regarding something rabbinic. It should be allowed. So we gave two reasons for that, right? One is because it's going to be permitted in the future, right? Tomorrow, whatever, right? That's one reason why. The other reason, as we said, because the rabbis wanted to be stringent. Why is that? Because, as we said, right, because people take Yom Tov lightly, so the rabbis wanted to be even more stringent to impress upon you. Right? Don't take Yom Tov lightly. Don't think it's a joke. Okay, so those are the two reasons that we gave. Because otherwise, it should have been allowed, right? It's a doubt regarding the rabbis. Okay, as we said, right? And the reason of the Rashba, we pushed it out, right? We said it wasn't correct. So I won't even mention it now. Okay. All right, so that's the way it goes. Good. So let's go to Dalet. There may be some more Bet Yosef that I have to read here. Maybe I missed something. Let's check that. Yeah, this piece. So it says here, Katav Rav Magid, Peg Bet Milchot Yom Tov, right? It says the Rav Magid, Mevo'ar Begemara, right? Explain the Gemara, he says, written in the Gemara, Chav Dal Amud Bet, Sheim Matzah Metzudot Mekulkalot Merev Yom Tov, right? We already mentioned this in the Shulchan Aruch, right? If you found that the trap was ruined, right, or broken, right, before Yom Tov, בידוע שמערב יום טוב ניצודו. So then we know for sure, right, that the animal was trapped before Yom Tov, because otherwise he couldn't do the job anymore. ולא נזכר בהלכות, so he says, not written in the halachot, וגם לא הזכיר רבנו לפי שדבר הכרחי הוא. So he says, also the Tur didn't mention this. So why didn't the Tur mention this halacha? So he says, because it's obvious, I mean, in other words, it's just a matter of logic, So there's no reason to really, to write this explicitly, whatever. So he left it out. But as we saw, right, the Shulchan Aruch, he did write it. Okay. Good. So then he says, פשוט, ולא נזכר בגמרא, אלא בגררה, דאם אין ידוע שהוא אסור, עד כן לשונו. דאין ידוע שהוא אסור. דאם אין ידוע שהוא אסור. Right, so in other words, he said, right, it's obvious, so, it wasn't needed to be mentioned. Okay, good. So that's the end of Gimel. Now we're going to go to Dalid. Let's see where Dalid is. Here we are. Okay, so it says like this, right? The Bet Yosef, it says, Katav Aran Shar Rosh de Lunil. Right? So it says the Ran that the Rosh of Lunil, this is not the same Rosh that we usually mention, right? Different guy. He comes from Lunil. So he says, right, that Hitir Safek Muchan B'Yom Tov. So he allows something which is doubtfully made on Yom Tov, Yom Shov Sheni, right? It says the second day of Yom Tov. If it's a doubt on the second day, we allow that, right? So he says, right, doesn't agree with it. He says, I don't like this heter. So, right, but he says, by me, he says the heter is good. Why is that? Because it's a double doubt, spek, double doubt. So therefore, right, we should even allow it in a case where it's something which is destined to be permitted because of the double doubt. So he says, since we only do second day of Yom Tov because of a custom of our forefathers, right? So we're not, we're not going to be so stringent. So he says, just like for them it's a doubt, for us it's also a doubt. So he says, since it's a stringency of the rabbis, right, rabbinical, so there's no reason to, right, add more. So he says, for sure here you have two doubts. It's a double doubt. Because if you have a doubt on the second day of Yom Tov, right, it's also double doubt, automatically. So, if it's, I hope I'm being clear what I'm saying here, but if not, you can ask me. So, just to write to elaborate a little bit on this, right? What is he saying over here? Since the second day of Yom Tov is only rabbinical, right? So the truth is we have like a double doubt. So therefore, we can allow, right, on the second day. Even though the first day the rabbis were stringent, but we have no evidence that they will be stringent on the second day as well. So the truth is, you learn from here a general rule, right? Which is good to know because it can be applied to many cases, several cases, whatever. The rule is that on the second day of Yom Tov, even though we say the second day of Yom Tov is just like the first day, right? More or less, right? It's a carbon copy. But when it comes to a double doubt, we don't say that. So therefore, right, we do allow. Spek, we do allow. It's like a general rule. I've seen this already before in other books as well. So yeah, that's the story.
Kavod Harav, an example of this could be when sometimes Shabbat falls on the second day, on the evening of the second day of Yom Tov, and you need to shower or something like that, and then therefore you can shower or no?
Well, the truth is on Yom Tov you're allowed to shower anyway.
Ah, okay.
You know what I mean? The prohibition of showering is only on Shabbat.
Not on the first and the second day of Yom Tov?
No. And I'm so, but let me clarify that, right? Because you need to know some things about that.
Yes.
On Shabbat, you're allowed to take a cold shower. That's one thing, right?
Okay.
On Yom Tov, you can take a hot shower. But, right, that only applies if you have like a boiler, in your building or your house. But if you have like one of those automatic, water heaters, that turns on every time you open the faucet, right? It comes on.
Mm-hmm.
So those are not allowed on Yom Tov.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason is because it's turning on the water every time you open the faucet.
Okay.
So if you have one of those units, right? In Israel, by the way, they have them. They're very common. So if you have one of those units, it's going to be a problem because every time you open the faucet, it's starting the machine like, from scratch. But here's the thing, right? We spoke about this on Passover that there are some units, right? Whether it's an oven or one of these water heaters, that they have a pilot light. So if it has a pilot light, there's already an existing flame there. So that will be okay. But the newer units, of these water heaters, they do not have pilot lights. So they just like they have electronic ignition. So it turns on every time. So therefore they will be forbidden. What else did I want to say? Yeah, so that's the story there. But if you have like just a regular boiler, like most buildings, right? They have just a boiler. And also most houses probably have a boiler unit. So if you have a boiler unit, you can use it on Yom Tov. No problem. Okay, that's the story there.
Thank you very much.
God bless. Okay, so as we said, right, the general rule is anything which is a doubt on the second day of Yom Tov automatically becomes a double doubt. Why is that? Because the second day of Yom Tov itself is a doubt. You know what I mean? So if you add one more doubt, it's a double doubt automatically. Okay. Let's go to the next one. Hey, right? Yeah, this one. So right, as we said in the Torah, im satam amat hamayim, that if he closed right the pond right of the fish, he closed it up. So what does that mean? He closed it up. That means that there's no water coming in and out, right? So therefore they can't really go anywhere, right? And therefore it should be allowed, as we said, right in the Torah. But we did say in the Ramah yesterday, if you remember, we said that if the pond is large, that would not apply, right? It would not be allowed because the fish can still escape from you. You have to go chasing it around. So if it's a small pond, like something really small, a little pool, whatever it is, right, whatever. So then it will be okay. So let's see what the Bit Yosef says here. Memra bepek en sadin, right? It's over there in the Gemara Kafei Amud Aleph, right? Which is the Masachet Betzah, right? Most of the halachot about Yom Tov come from Masachet Betzah. So it says here, Umashma beGemara, Dashmuinan she'enan tzichin zimun de schirat amat mayim chashiv zimun. Oh, so he says, right? It implies in the Gemara that we don't really need designation in this case. In other words, you don't need to designate the fish and say, and I'll be using these, for Yom Tov, right? Before Yom Tov. Why is that? The fact that you closed it up, right, and you shut up the water from coming in and out, right? So that's already considered like designation. Rav Magid, so says Rav Magid, Hikshal Rabad, he asked on the Rabad, Berashba and the Rashba, Shesovrin she'en sadin bevaret dagim klal. They hold that you shouldn't you shouldn't catch fish from the pond at all. מהד סוחר אמת המים, ונראה לי לתרץ לדברים שהם רחבים הרבה, אף על פי שאין צריך מצודה לצוד הדגים שבהן, בכל מקום מתוך שהם מכוסים מן העין, הם נשמטים לכאן וכאן, הילקח לא חשיב כמצודים, אלא אבל אמת המים מתוך שאינה רחבה אינם יכולים להשמט, הילקח אבל הם כנצודים, right? So this is exactly what he just points out here, what we just mentioned a minute ago, which is that it really depends on the size of the pond, right, or whatever you have there, right? This enclosure, whatever it is that you have, that has the fish inside, right? Whatever it may be, some little pool, whatever. The point is, right, that or aquarium, right? You have an aquarium, right? You just pull the fish out of there, right? Whatever. So he's telling you, right? It really depends on the size. If it's something large, right? So then we said, right, you need to really run after it and catch it. So it's like you're trapping it. But if it's something small, you just reach in with your hand and you grab it, So it doesn't really need much trapping. There's no trapping involved there, right? Just taking it basically, So it really depends on that. That's what he's saying. Okay, so then he goes on, וכתב הרב מגיד, דאמת המים אפילו ארוכה, כמה כיוון שאינה רחבה, דגים שבתוכה, הבו כנצודים בשערי. So this rabbi says, Rabbi Magid, right, that if it's something narrow, he says, you can do it because it's considered to be like something small. Interesting. We'll see in the Shulchan Aruch how he paskins about this. ונראה לדלת הרב רשב"א, נמי אפילו ארוכה כמה דגים שבתוך בכל מצודים הם, לכיוון שאינם רחבים, אינם יכולים להשתמט. So he also says, right, from these rabbis, Ravad and Rashba, that if it's something narrow, right, even though it's long, it's considered to be like, you can just pick it up and take it, right? It's not really a matter of trapping it. Okay, interesting. So that's the Beit Yosef. Let's see Shulchan Aruch. זה שולחן ערוך, אם שכר אמת המים בכניסה, ביציאה, מערב יום טוב, מותר לקח ממנה דגים ביום טוב, דהבה לניצודים ומלומדים. Right, so he mentions this thing about the, from the tour, as we just said, which is that if you close up, right, this water, dike, whatever, and so there's no water coming in and out. So the fish has nowhere to go, basically, right? So therefore, you just reach in and grab it, right? So it's allowed to take from there on Yom Tov. What are we talking about here, right? He says he did this on Erev Yom Tov. In other words, he closed it up before Yom Tov, not on Yom Tov. So it's important to point that out, right? Not that we're actually, doing this, right? We don't have, we don't have this kind of these kind of premises on our property, so we're not really doing this much. But whatever, right? So it is what it is, right? But whoever it applies to, it applies to. So, I guess some people do have some ponds, with fish inside there and whatever. There are some people like that. They have aquariums, all kinds of stuff, right? Little pools, whatever. God knows what. Whatever. I don't have one. Okay. So, all right, that's the story. So, yeah, as we said, right, that if you close it up on Erev Yom, before Yom Tov, you can use it. So right, he brings here in the parentheses the reason, as we saw in the Beit Yosef. The reason is because since it's narrow, right, they have nowhere to go, basically. This, right, this dike, whatever it is, right? Okay, good. Let's go on. Let's go to Vav. So as we said, right, the Torah mentioned, we read this last time, that if you have in the house, right, avazim etanigolim, right, chickens or geese, right, whatever they are, you're allowed to take them. Why is that? Because they're already trapped as it is, right? They're in your house, so they have nowhere to go. So you're allowed to take them, right, and use them on Yom Tov, slaughter them, whatever it is. Okay, so says Bet Yosef, Braita Pek and Tzadin, right? Where's the source for this? In the Braita of En Tzadin, Kaf He Amud Aleph, and right, as we said, same Gemara. Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, right? This rabbi says, Modim Bet Hillel Bet Shammai, right? It says they both admit, right? Whether it's Bet Hillel or Bet Shammai, Al Sheizmin Betoch HaKen, Matzah Lifnei HaKen, Shasrin. So he says, right, if you designated a bird in front of the nest, whatever, right? And you found it there, outside, that's forbidden. So we're talking about these, right, dovecotes, right, whatever they call those, right? Right, so these birds are like, they're very independent. They go out, they go in. But he says, when it comes to, as we said, right, chickens and geese, they don't really need to be designated. Why is that? As we said, right, because they're already trapped as it is. They have nowhere to go. Okay, so Katavu Arish Be'arov Rosh, right? And the Rif and the Rosh wrote this halacha. The Perek Kama in the first Perek V'simu Ba, and they concluded there Mipnei Shehen Birshut Hadam. So they gave a reason, right? Exactly what we just said, right? That they're in your property, so they're like, private property for you. They're not independent, they're not wild. So there's no, you don't need to trap them. They're already in your possession. So that which it says in the Mishnah, right, that whatever is lacking trapping is forbidden. Gemara asks, right, what does that mean? What does it mean lacking trapping? Mechusar seda. Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shemuel, Kol sheomrim Abba Metzuda v'netzudenu. So whatever needs to be like, trapped, like, actually caught, right, is forbidden. Amar Le'abeh ve'abazin ותרנגולים שאומרים אבא מצווה ותרנגולים ויוני הדסות פטור וכתבו התוספות על זה ואם תאמר והקיים עלן כל פטורי דשבת פטור ועל אסור ויש לומר שלפי מה שפירשתי מתניתין ניחא דגזרינן מזונות עטו שמא יבוא לצוד מהם ואם כן על כל כך צריך לומר דאסור מן התורה אם אינו אסור אלא מדרבנן, לא בגזרינן ליתן מזונות משום שמא יצודם, תהווה גזירה בגזירה. כתב ראש, לפי זה אסור לצוד ביום טוב אווזים ותרנגולים ההולכים בחצר, ואין העולם נזהרים מזה. So the Rosh comes here and differentiates, right? He says when it comes to chickens and geese, there's two types, right? There's a type that you have in your house, right, which we said is allowed, but what about the one which is in your backyard? Just roaming around, right? So he says, according to this concept that we just mentioned here, this opinion, whatever, the Rosh says it should be really not allowed if it's outdoors, because they're not really trapped, out there. You got to chase them, But he says the custom is not like that, he says, right? The custom is to be lenient. Okay, interesting. So Balaitur says, right, that regarding the geese and the chickens, the patur motra kama, ואף לדברי התוספות איקה למימר, מה שהוצרכו לתרץ לכל המחוסר צדה אסור היינו חייב משום דאביי הקשה, כך כתב בפשיטות לרבי יוסף מאווזין ותרנגולין המתניתין, ומאי הווה לקושיה כולי, כיוון דמצינו דפרש דפטור ותרנגולין, הווה פטור, אבל אסור לכך הוא צריכו לתרץ דמחוצה צדה חייב, לכך אפילו אם פרשת פטור דבזין ותרנגולין פטור, אבל אסור, הקטע תיק שלך לך ומיהו אפשר, אף לדברי התוספות, הווה פטור מותר, כיוון דבאים לכלוב ומזונותן עליך, לא מצר למצדין הוא. Right, so interesting, right? There's a discussion over here regarding, the geese and the chicken. So what's the discussion, right? The discussion is, as we said, right? If they're in your yard, are they allowed? Are they considered to be trapped? So he brings here, like an opinion which says like this, that it could be that they're considered to be trapped, even though they run around, like freely in your yard, on your property, right, on your barn, whatever it is, right? Whatever. So what's the reason why? So he says because when they come to eat, they come into their little cage there, right, whatever, and they eat there. So in other words, they do come in, to visit you when they need to eat, right? Even though they're running around freely. So therefore, perhaps they're considered to be like trapped, Interesting. Okay, so we have two different ways of looking at this, right? The truth is that, even before they mentioned it here, it already came to my mind, like, are we talking about in the house or also in the yard? Because it's not really the same thing, Obviously, whatever, right? Okay, so we'll see how the halacha is, right, regarding that. כתב רמב"ם, פרק ב' בהלכות יום טוב, Rambam says, אווזים ותרנגולים יונים שבית הרי אלו מוכנים. So Rambam says, right, if they're in the house, they're allowed. They're considered to be allowed. וכתבו אגרות מימוניות בשם הרבייה, מיהו ירא שמיים ייתן עיניו מתחילה ליטול ולא יברור ויניח דף אגב דאינו מוקצה מכל מקום חשו חכמים יתירך. So he brings here another opinion, right, which in the name of the Raviyah, right, who says to be a little bit stringent regarding this. So he says a God-fearing person, what he should do is, right, like put your eyes on what you want to take and take it. So what does that mean? Like, don't, change your mind and take another one, because that means you have to, chase them around. וכן פסק רבנו שבת עד כאן. So that's also, there's another rabbi, he says, passing like this. כך הוא דת הגאון מארי אבו הווה, also this rabbi, שכתב על דברי רבנו, because he writes regarding the words of the Torah, אין לומר שיש חילוק בין ההולכים בחצר להולכים בבית. So he says, right, that there's no difference between, the ones that are in the house and the ones that are in the yard. שהראש אמר שהולכים בחצר והמחבר, that the Rosh said, right, they're going in the courtyard, ומחבר אמר אווזים ותרנגולין שבבית, שהנה המחבר לא אסר אלא, הנה, מחבר לא אסר אלא במה שצריך לומר במצודה. נראה לפי זה שאין לחלק, אבל נראה שיש להחמיר בזה. So he says, right, that even though, it's not so clear, but he says good to be stringent, good to be proper to be stringent here. שהרי גבי יונה שובח אסרו, so he said because regarding the dovecote, right, they forbade that. ולא זימון שאמר זה וזה אני נוטל למחר אמינן ואמינן בלא זימון. So in other words, he says you should only permit this if you designated it before Yom Tov. So what does that mean, right? Designated? That means he said, right, I'm going to take this. He verbally said it, right? ואמינן בגמרא שהטעם בזה הוא משום דחיישינן שאם לא יאמר זה בזה אני נוטל. So the Gemara says, right, the reason why we say this is because we're concerned that if he doesn't say I'm going to take from here, אלא שאומר מכאן אני נוטל, if he just says, right, I'm going to take from this area, למחר דשקיל כחושים ומנח לו, he's going to take, right, the weak ones and put them aside. Okay, ונראה כשמשטלטל החחוש מטלטל מה שלא הזמין ובזה אסור. So he says that if he's taking one of the skinnier ones that he doesn't want them, So it'd be like forbidden. וגם כן, כשנוטל אווזים ותרנגולים ומניחן נוטל אחרים נמצא שמטלטל מה שלא היה צריך לי. So he says, right, bottom line is like this. If you don't designate, the problem is that you're going to take like, maybe a couple of times, and you're going to do extra exertion there. We don't want that. לפיכך אין לקח אלא מה שיודע שהם ראויים לשחיטה. So he says, therefore, you should only take something which is, fitting for slaughter. ואפילו שנאמר, דלא דמה ליוני שובח, even if we say, right, that they don't resemble the dovecoat, שמכאן כולם מוכנים, because here all of them are designated, מה שאין כן כשאומר מכאן אני נוטל. Not so when he says, right, I'm going to take from here, שלא הכין אלא השמנים, he only, right, means the good ones, the fat ones. עם כל זה, טלטול העוף שלו לצורך שאפשר לבדוק מערב יום טוב, איזו שמנה ואיזו כחושה, נראה שאסור. So he says, but, it would seem that it's forbidden to do in a way which is ambiguous, and then you have to take like more than one, to pick out the good one. B'yom tov, all right. So in other words, he's telling you, right, the proper thing to do is to designate it before, the nice big fat one. This way, right, you know which one you want, and there's no ambiguity. Okay. אבל בהגות השני, פרק כמה דבצע. So it says, but this rabbi, first פרק בצע כתב, מי שיש לו תרנגולת בביתו, somebody has a chicken in his house, he says, almost done, שיקצה אותם מגדל ביצים, but he designated those for eggs, for laying eggs, not for slaughter. צריך להזמין אותם בערב יום טוב. So then he says, if that's the case, he has to designate them before Yom Tov, right? Because they're not really designated for that purpose. אם עלה על דעתו לאכול מהם, if he wants to eat them, ביום טוב ויום טוב, ואותם שלא הזמין אסורים. So he says the ones that he did not designate are forbidden, but to carry them, they're muktzeh. About תרנגולת העומדת באכילה, but he says, when it comes to a chicken, right, which is, for eating purposes, in other words, it's not for laying eggs, אין לחוש, we're not concerned. אין מטלטל בשביק לו, whether he's going to, right, carry it and then take another one, right, instead of this one. She says he can pick out whichever one he wants. As though she would say, whatever one. Because they're all fitting to eat. So therefore, you'll have to carry all of them, he says. So he's little bit more lenient than the opinion we just saw before. So that's according to Rambam, he says, right? And that's how we paskin. So in other words, it says Bet Yosef, how do we paskin that any chicken, right, you're allowed to take, as long as it's meant for eating, it's and it's not designated for laying eggs. But the Rambam says, right, what are we talking about? We're talking about the ones that are in the house. So let's see what he says in the Shulchan Aruch, right? Are we talking about also in the yard as well or not? So it says the Shulchan Aruch, אווזים ותרנגולים ויונים שבבית או שבחצר, העומדים לאכילה מותר לצודן ואין צריכים בזימון. Right. So this is exactly what he says, right? Geese, chickens, right? And also the pigeons, whatever, right? That are in the house or the yard, right? So in other words, he also includes the ones that are in the yard. As we said, right, that the Rosh said the custom was to be lenient regarding that. In other words, even though they're in the yard and they're not in the house. As long as they're designated, right, for eating, right, for slaughter, they're not designated for laying eggs. Mutar letzudan, so therefore you're allowed to trap those, right? You're allowed to catch them. And they don't need to be designated, these. So we said, right, which one needs to be designated? The one that is designated for laying eggs, and now you want to change it, right? All of a sudden, and you want to slaughter it. So that one you need to designate before Yom Tov. But these, which are, just designated for eating, they're not designated for laying eggs. So they are allowed without designation. Right. So as we said, right, nowadays, we don't really slaughter animals on Yom Tov, right? It's, we're very far from that today. we're not really in that category today, right? So whatever, but it's good to know in theory, right? If you're a right farmer, kind of guy, I mean, whatever rancher, that's these things apply to you. Right? I remember I was told, by my chavuta that I had in Israel, something interesting. He said that his father-in-law, who was like a famous rabbi, he said that he was very stringent when it comes to, slaughter of chickens. So he didn't trust any of those, slaughterhouses, that slaughter chickens. So he says he used to do it in his garage. He had a garage, and he would slaughter the chickens in his garage. Like private, family slaughter. So there are people, like who are, into this kind of stuff. It's rare, but it does exist. The truth is that here, these Bukharians over here in my area, a lot of them have chicken, chicken coops in the garage or in the backyard. A lot of them have it here. It's quite common. So whatever, right? It is what it is. Okay, so yeah, that's the story. Okay, so if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, we'll stop here. Okay, very good. Thanks for coming. Right, be blessed with wealth and health and happiness. Chodesh Tov, Laila Tov, Chazak Baruch, and we'll see you tomorrow. Bezat Hashem, God willing.
Thank you so much.
God bless. All the best. Okay.